What's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 247. I am your host, Cody Goodwin. I'm here with Mike and Alex. I'm in Nashville. I don't know if you can tell, but the background is not my usual background full of signs that I have stolen from various events that I've covered. It is instead just the black sheet here at Bridgestone Arena, here for the SEC men's basketball tournament. Alabama doesn't play until Friday. We are recording this on Thursday morning. We're here to just kind of discuss the men's basketball vibes, I suppose. Like just a quick vibe check coming into the SEC tournament. This Alabama team has been a funny team to talk about over the course of the season. I think they added a new, I don't know exactly what you would call it. I wanted to say chapter. I don't know if chapter is the right word, but a new data point, we'll call it that, with their 93-91 overtime victory over Auburn at Neville Arena last Saturday. I'd like to think that made things feel a little bit better coming into Nashville. That's where I'll throw this out to you guys. How do we feel about the Alabama men's basketball team coming into this SEC tournament? They're the 3 seed, 24-7 overall record in the regular season, 13-5 record in SEC play. I think there's a potential path for them to potentially still nail down a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Mike, I'll throw it to you first. How do we feel about the Crimson Tide coming into this week?
I feel exactly the same way I felt before the Auburn game, which is probably exactly the same way I felt before the Tennessee game. I feel like both of those games came down to the wire. Those could have gone either way. Was it Meshack who hit the buzzer beater in Tennessee?
Yeah.
If he misses that shot, the game goes to overtime, Alabama maybe wins. Auburn, if Broome hits that shot right before the end of regulation,
if
I have that correct, Auburn might win that game, Alabama loses. It's possible Alabama might have won both of those games if one thing happened and the other happened, or they lost both of those games. At the end of the day, I don't think it really matters. They were both last possession plays or last possession games. I think it's about how you played overall in those games. You can even make the argument you could feel better about Alabama after those 2 games than you were going into those 2 games. Now, granted, you had the Florida game in the middle, but because I think the way that they played on the road at Tennessee was pretty good. And I think the way that they played on the road at Auburn was obviously pretty good as well. Not perfect in either case. The end result is different. One's a win, one's a loss, but I don't think the overall game was all that different from Alabama in each case. So I kind of feel the same way. And it's a team with all the potential in the world to win the SEC tournament, to win the national title. As Nate Oates put yesterday, potential doesn't really matter right now. Because if you don't actually execute in the moment, then your season's over. Not if you lose in the SEC tournament, but if you lose in the NCAA tournament. So that's really what matters. And again, I don't know if my opinions necessarily changed a whole lot given the results of those 2 very close games, the Tennessee and the Auburn game. I think maybe you could argue the Florida game kind of gave you some more pause about some of the issues that have gone wrong for this team with rebounding and a front court that can really hammer you. And that's probably how this team's going to get beaten if they are beaten. But overall, I go back to what I said a month ago. Like, you get to a certain point of the season, just show me the tournament. And we're almost there. And we're still not there, but show me the NCAA tournament in another week here.
Well, if you believe some basketball conspiracy theorists, the bracket has already made. So, Alex, how do you feel about Alabama coming into this week after the skid, after beating Auburn in overtime on the road? Like, does anything about how you feel about this team, has anything changed?
No, it's just confirmation. It's confirmation that this team, when it plays up, can play well, but it can also find ways to lose. It's like, of course, they're going to put their best foot forward against Auburn to end the regular. Of course. If I know to win, great. Where's that team been all year? Like, where are they going to be in the first round of the SEC tournament against a team that maybe they don't care that much about? Like, that's kind of where we've been all year with them. It's like, where's their headspace at? Where's their consistency and performance? Again, the potential is great. It's great. It just doesn't show up all the time. So what that means for this week, I have no idea. Of course, it means that they're still contenders when it comes to the tournament because they can reach that high point. It worries me that they can't run off a string of wins. They had that nice stretch in the middle part of the season, even though they weren't at times playing great with free throws, with turnovers, those things. But it's like you just kind of got to see it more than one game. And in a game where again, of course they're going to play their best in that game. If they hadn't, that would have been a real problem. So it doesn't really change anything because it's the same team that I thought they could be, and in some respects, the same team I worried they would be because they don't put their best foot forward every single night.
I'd like to circle back on a point that Mike made, and that's just the idea that when they played Tennessee, when they played Auburn, I would argue even when they played Florida, I don't know that they necessarily played bad, even though they lost 2 of those 3 games, and they have lost, I believe, 4 of 7 coming into Nashville this week. Nate made a pretty big deal out of this, just that he doesn't think any other team in the country has played a 7-game stretch similar to this. And the 7-game stretch, I'll recap it from February 15th on. They played number 1 Auburn, lost that one by 9. They played number 15 Missouri on the road, lost that one by 12. They played number 17 Kentucky, won that one at home. Kentucky was hampered with a few injuries, but still good to take care of business. Mississippi State at home, ran them off the floor. Number 5 Tennessee on the road. Probably should have won it, but didn't. Lost that one on the game winner by Mayshek. Florida at home, who was ranked number 5, lost that one. And then they went on the road against number 1 Auburn and won that one in overtime. I would argue that I don't know that they necessarily played bad in that stretch. I think there are things they could have done better, right? Like against Auburn, both times in the loss, sometimes you get beat. In the win, you were able to get the ball last and you were able to execute. Against Tennessee, you had the ball last, you couldn't execute, you paid for it. Against Florida, sometimes you just come up against a better team. Against Missouri, look, 98 points should be good enough to beat most SEC teams unless, that night Missouri shot the leather off the ball. There was a lot of people, I think, that maybe wanted to hit the panic button, or there was a cause for concern because there was a stretch of 4 losses in 6 games, similar to how there was last year. But even Nate Oates said that there was a difference between last year's skid and this year's skid. Last year's skid, they kind of quit. And you could tell within the first, 4 to 8 minutes of the game, those guys did not want to be on the floor. This year, they have kept playing. They have played, I thought, fairly well. And sometimes you just run up against really good teams. Sometimes you run up against better teams. Sometimes you just miss a couple of shots here and there. I guess, I don't know. I feel like I needed to say that with a period and throw it out there.
Can I be cynical on that point and say, wouldn't you rather this skid be a result of quitting than trying?
Well, why?
Because if you quit, at least you can be like, well, we're going to give more effort and we'll be better. If you tried and failed, you just failed.
But I like the idea that they have continued to consistently play high-level ball, even if they haven't won all of these games. I think there's something to that.
Yeah. I think the ultimate thing that's kind of going to have to determine all of this is, and we won't know until the end of the season, is how good was the SEC really? Was it this historic thing and everybody got beat up? Or was this, the skid, Alabama's record overall, a result of just dealing with this every single week?
Mike's got thoughts.
I know where Mike wants to go with this.
Well, it's like football. SEC doesn't make it very far in the playoff. And everybody says, not everybody, but I'm thinking like Jalen Milroe specifically, what he said at the Super Bowl, that it just beat up on each other during the year. And then the results in the playoff weren't there.
I didn't think we'd get a Jalen Milroe quote in a
I think we should get Jalen Milroe's take on the SEC if they have some teams knocked out early in the NCAA tournament.
Want to know mentality.
Will that be kind of the story? Is like the SEC beat up on itself, guys were worn down, guys were injured. I mean, Alabama's been varying states of health all year. It seems like maybe they're getting a little bit better with Darion Reed, but then again, Grant Nelson's been dealing with a lot of things too. So if that's happens, not necessarily to Alabama, but anybody in the SEC, I think we're going to hear a lot about how this SEC regular season beat up on teams. And look, I don't know if anybody's going to have a whole lot of sympathy for that because the SEC is the one that added new teams. Not that Oklahoma and Texas are the ones that are doing the damage here, but you keep growing your conference, like it's your own doing essentially. Like if you want to play in an 8-team conference and be the best team every year, and you can do that. Like you can go create your own conference, but nobody's going to do that because there's no money in that. So be Gonzaga essentially. So again, I don't know if anybody will have sympathy if that happens, but I can see a lot of explanations like that. For Alabama, though, I don't know. I think in general, yes, they played pretty good in that stretch. The Tennessee and the Auburn games I thought were the better performances. Even the Kentucky game, like I'm not even sure they played as well in the Kentucky game as they did against Auburn or Tennessee, to be honest. It was at home, a beat-up Kentucky team that's not as good as Auburn or Tennessee, and they still came out pretty slow in that game. That's not what happened, in Tennessee or Auburn. So, the Florida game, I think there was an effort issue that Nate called out. The Missouri game, obviously defensively in the first half, was a major effort issue. The first Auburn game, a lot of things did not go well. Auburn came out pretty fast. So, again, it's different things every time. We can talk about the end of game situations in Tennessee. If they had lost this game on Saturday, if Mark Sears' ball doesn't go through in the last shot and Auburn wins in 2 overtimes, like, what are we talking about as the reason why they lost that game? At the end of the day, I don't know if we're going to be talking about it in another week or two. So let's talk about it right now, right? But it just the correlation between how strong their schedule was in the last 7 or 8 games to whether you can win a Sweet 16 game in Newark, New Jersey against St. John's. Like, is there a correlation? Yes. Are you battle tested? Yes. Is there some credence to that? Yes. But sometimes the game is just the game, and what you're doing on the floor that night of the Sweet 16 is really all that matters. So we can just talk and talk and talk, but that's the beauty of the NCAA tournament is everybody tunes in, and the NCAA makes $1 billion off of the drama and the unexpected things that always tend to happen. So
in the betting,
but that's not a direct. I mean, they make $1 billion directly off the TV aspect of it.
Well, why do you think people are watching the TV?
That's true.
They're betting.
That's true.
They're going to need the $1 billion after a few court cases get handled. Neither here nor there. I wanted to ask this too, because this is kind of this is the start of the postseason for Alabama. You look back on their regular season record, 24-7, pretty good quad 1 game record, 13-5 in SEC play. I know they had that skid near the end of the season, but largely another pretty good year all in all, with still obviously the most important part of the year coming up next. Was there anything about this Alabama team that maybe surprised you over the course of the year? Alex, I'll throw this to you first. Just in terms of the expectations we had for these guys and what they ultimately produced, was there anything that was just like, that's kind of interesting as the season unfolded?
Not really. I think the fact that I don't want to put this. The depth of the team was both a good thing and also a thing that I think hurt them in terms of developing chemistry and a clear identity. And the lack of a clear identity, meaning here there are 3 guys who can carry us through a tournament. We kind of know who they are, but they keep changing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that I would have hoped by this point in the season we would not be questioning. That's the thing that concerns me. And that's the thing that frankly surprises me, even though it was kind of a thing going into the season where I was like, how many guys are they actually going to rotate, and what does that mean?
There's been so many ebbs and flows to that. Because there's a point in the year where I think you could make a legitimate argument that Aiden Holloway was playing the best basketball of any player in the team. And he has not been playing great basketball the last couple of weeks. And that's something that Nate just talked about yesterday, and they need to find ways to get him open, etc. There was a point in the year where Mo Diabate seemed like he was really coming on, and people were asking, why is he not in the starting lineup? And he offensively, people were making the comparison between him and Herb Jones. That was coming up at some point in January or February.
A lot.
And he's faded. And that's something that Nate mentioned yesterday. The last couple of weeks has not really been there. Nate called him out after the Kentucky game, for not being locked into the scouting report. Jaron Stevenson goes off against Texas. What has he done since? Well, Nate said yesterday he needs to step up. Mark Sears has had a lot of ebb and flows. I mean, the LSU game. And then he has all these 30-point games. And then he has a really quiet game against Auburn, but has the assists. I mean, Grant Nelson, his health, and where has he been? If you aren't asking,
sometimes it's a good way. Like Grant Nelson, if you'd gone in Friday morning and said Grant Nelson is going to be your best player in the IBOB, everyone would have said, "What? He scored as many points in one game as he did the 3 games combined before that." Like, that's good that you can have those moments that you don't expect, but it also gives me a little cause for concern.
Right. But if you're going to ask me, for me personally, what's the biggest thing that surprised me? Like, rim protection was like the buzzword of last offseason. That rim protection was the biggest problem that was keeping Alabama from winning against UConn, being a national champion last year. That they had missed Charles Bediako, that they got screwed by his draft decision. That was all of the talk last offseason. They go out and get Clifford Morey from Rutgers, who has this massive block rate in the Big Ten. It hasn't really shown up in that same way. Nate was asked about that, last week? Talked about pace of play being different. What they ask him to do is different than what Rutgers was asking him to do. How SEC big men play is different than Big Ten big men. They play on the outside some more. There's less opportunities for the blocks. But in the second half of that Florida game, there was one sequence where Clifford Morey was the guy standing between the basket and whoever the hell was driving for Florida. I forget who it was. It wasn't Alex Condon. It was somebody else. And that dude just went straight through Clifford Morey. And I said, that's not rim protection. So, that's the sort of thing that you were lacking last season. You bring him in. I don't think the overall product for Cliff has been quite what anybody expected. There's been stretches where he's been pretty good. I think he's gotten better in general towards the end of the season, but that is still a major question mark for me. And if you come up against a team in the tournament, the NCAA tournament, that can really beat you down low, or if Cliff gets into foul trouble, I think there potentially is a big problem for Alabama there.
Can I counter the Cliff point? Last year, we knew, and they knew, they being Alabama, that defense was the problem, right? Like, according to Ken Pom, they were like outside the top 100 in defensive efficiency. If you go look right now, they are currently 32nd in defensive efficiency. I don't think that's all Cliff, but I think that's a huge part of it. On top of that, I'm not sure that they specifically wanted, let's go get Cliff out of the portal, add water, boom, defense. I don't think it's as simple. However, the idea of rim protection is a button that they can press now. Like, it's just another thing that opposing teams have to deal with. And if you want to look at it through the lens of last year's game against UConn, they didn't have that button that they could press. So in the second half, after they figured out a way to run Alabama off the line, they didn't have, they were going inside to Nick Pringle and Donovan Clingan was just killing him. Or on the defensive side, it was, again, Pringle versus Donovan Clingan, or, they would slide Grant Nelson to the 5. And it was not an ideal matchup. Now they have that matchup, or at least they feel good about it. It's a button that they can press now, which I think was probably more the point, that they have this versatility that they did not have last year, and that will help them in a 4 to 8 minute stretch of an NCAA tournament game when they need that answer. That would be my rebuttal to the Cliff point.
No, it's better. It's just, is it, to the original question, is it what's surprising about this team? I don't think it's to the level that anybody really expected.
I worry that they're the ultimate jack of all trades, master of none. That's the thing that I worry they're going to end up being, is man, they were good at this and this and this and this, but were they great at any one thing? And that's what you got to have. You have to have your out pitch, and I don't know what it is. I don't.
Well, their fastball is scoring 90 points a game, which most games that should take care of business. However, in the NCAA tournament, you've got to have that duality, that versatility, and you hope that Cliff comes through for them when they have to press that button. Like, to Mike's point, which he's been making since, late December, early January, we'll find out in the tournament when they have to defend a big man, when they have to, rely on Cliff. Like, can Cliff provide you that 20 point, 10 rebound game to advance, right? Like, can he do that? We won't find out for another week or so.
Who do you guys think is the most important person? Like, if you pick one or two guys who it's okay, this is not just their path this week in Nashville.
Sure.
What?
I'm not even sure, because there's different arguments to be made. I mean, there was a point where Cody was sitting next to me in Coleman Coliseum saying that Chris Youngblood was the X factor, that every time he scored 10 or more points that they were winning. Well, he scored 9 points against Auburn. They still won, but he's been a guy who kind of came on the Mississippi State games, both of them, a couple other games in there too, where it was just shooting the lights out. And in the last couple games, just not really there for him. It was 4 of 10 against Auburn, 1 of 3, 0 of 2 at the line. If they can get a secondary guy like that outside of Sears to be hitting threes, that's going to go a long way for him. You can argue Grant Nelson being healthy and being aggressive and being a good defender is the X factor. You can argue Mark Sears not turning the ball over and scoring at the rim and getting to the line is the X factor. You could argue LeBaron Philon hitting a few threes, which he has not done very well. He was 1 of 5 against Auburn, is the X factor. You can argue Aiden Collier. You can argue Mo Diabate. That's what won them a game in a tournament last year. Like, there's so many different ways to go with that. But to Alex's point, like, you just don't know. Like, it's spin the wheel game to game on who's going to be the players of the game, if you will, the most important players, which is, it's good to have that versatility. It's good to have that level of depth. It's just the consistency and the reliability of certain ways of playing or players in certain games. Like, it's not always there. And that's what would scare me a little bit as you advance deeper into the tournament.
I think you probably need pretty consistent high-level games from both Mark and Grant. If you get that, I think whoever the third person is doesn't matter as long as a third person continues to step up. It could be Cliff. It could be Aiden Holloway. It could be Chris Youngblood, which, to your point, Mike, he has scored 10-plus points in 9 games. Alabama is 9-0 in those games, including 5 wins on the road. So something to keep in mind. But as long as a third person steps up, I think they will give themselves a chance so long as Mark and Grant continue to play well in every single game in the postseason, whether it's this week or starting next week in the NCAA tournament. That's at least my thought. The SEC tournament is this week. We saw or at least I watched, I don't know if you guys watched any of the games on Wednesday in the first round. The second round takes place today. We're recording this on Thursday. Alabama doesn't play until the quarterfinal round on Friday. The results from Wednesday's first round: Arkansas beat South Carolina 72-68. Texas took care of Vanderbilt 79-72. Mississippi State ran LSU off the court 91-62. And then Oklahoma beat Georgia 81-75. That was a fun back and forth game. Oklahoma plays Kentucky in the late game on Thursday. Winner gets Alabama. The other second round games: Mississippi State versus Missouri, Texas versus A&M, Ole Miss versus Arkansas. Outside of Alabama, is there anything about this tournament this week to you guys that is interesting, intriguing, that you're going to be paying attention to or not?
I mean, the possibility of the number 1 seed, I guess, is there. Like you said, it's Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, I think, is really the competition there. Florida being in the lead right now. If there's an upset, if Alabama wins a couple games, could that change? Yes. Does it mean a ton? Not really to me. Like, whether you're a low 1 seed or a high 2 seed, like, you're not going to Atlanta if you're a regional. I think Auburn has that on lock, so that doesn't help you there. It maybe changes whether you go to Newark or Indianapolis. Does that mean a whole lot? I mean, you can get into the weeds with the matchups and some of that, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's a huge deal if you don't get the 1 seed, whatever. Somebody made the point on our board, like, it was probably more exciting as an Alabama fan when you were on the bubble, and then you had this possibility of kind of stringing along 4 wins in Nashville and getting into the tournament, and that was always a possibility. Now it's like, do we really have to do this? And look, last year they got knocked out by Florida, and I don't have the quote in front of me. I'm pretty sure Nate Oates said maybe there's a silver lining here and we can get some extra rest before the NCAA tournament, and that worked out pretty well for them. Granted, he got asked about that yesterday, and he basically said, we're not looking necessarily to get bounced early so we can get extra rest. He said that might be something I sell my players on if we do get bounced early. But if you're Auburn, if you're Florida, if you're Tennessee, if you're Alabama, if you do not get the Sunday, I don't think it matters a whole lot. Sorry, Greg Sankey, but I don't think it matters.
I tend to agree. Alex, how do you feel about just this week in the competition?
I don't care. I mean, I really don't care. I mean, can you play a high level of basketball? If you win or lose, can you play a high level of basketball for a game or two? That'd be great. But, like, I think to Mike's point, it doesn't – this is a prelim. This is getting ready for the main event. And when you're a team like Alabama, and this is the Bama podcast, it's Roll Pod. It's not, Kentucky.
It's not Woo Pig.
It's not Woo Pig. Well,
that'd be a great podcast name. Woo Pod. Woo Pod.
But is it about Wu-Tang Clan or is it about Arkansas basketball? I don't know.
Woo Pod is for the kids.
Woo Pod, Pig Pod. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Arkansas is a team that is like, this is useful. What they're doing is useful in Nashville. It's for Alabama. They've graduated from worrying about that, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I wrote this on the board because there were a couple of people that were asking how they feel about coming into this week. And I generally feel optimistic just based on what we've seen from Alabama the last few weeks, even though they've lost 4 of their last 7 coming in. I generally feel pretty good just about the way they've been playing. I know that winning this tournament is not the most important thing in the world. It doesn't hurt to hang a banner. I know Nate Oates loves those when he can get them. If they run the table and they win it, they could potentially be the 4th 1 seed. I think that matters to some. To Mike's point, I don't know that that necessarily matters to me because we've seen what this team is able to do when they get hot in March. However, if you want to be the 1 seed to get the easier path, I can understand wanting that as well. I also don't think they need to if they have new plays, they don't need to unveil them this week. Like, save those for the NCAA tournament. And just if you win it, cool. If not, it's, again, to Mike's point, it's not the end of the world. But I do want to see them continue to play at a high level consistency. Like, just continue to play at a high level. If you can do that and continue to get better, I think that'll give people more optimism going into next week. Mike, you look like you want to say something.
No, I'm not trying to be cynical. I've seen it go both ways. Like, I've seen this team completely flop in the SEC tournament and then go to San Diego and just not show up for the game against Notre Dame. I've seen them win the SEC tournament and then get upset I was sitting in Hinkle Fieldhouse watching them lose to UCLA because Herb Jones was missing free throws at the end of the game. The most reliable player they had all season, the best player that maybe in program history by the time his NBA career is done, he could get there. Missed 4 free throws in a row in the last 2 minutes of that game, and they lost to UCLA. I sat there in Louisville, Kentucky, when this team with Brandon Miller, top 3 NFL, NBA, I don't know what he plays, NBA draft pick, against San Diego State, which was a good team, but not a great team necessarily.
Well, they got to the final that year, and I'm going to sit on that.
Right, but they didn't have a Brandon Miller. I watched as they lost to that team, and they had like a 5 or 6 point lead with X minutes to go in that game. And that's after they won the SEC tournament by beating all 3 opponents by double digits. Like, I've seen it go all these different ways. And I think there's some correlation from one to the next, but the beauty of the NCAA tournament is that you don't know what's going to happen. And you could have some random ass kid that nobody's ever heard of before go off on you. The Jake Golke last year, whoever.
Jack Golke. Get his name right, man.
It could be some random ass kid that everybody's going to be talking about that just goes off on you. And there's nothing you can do about it, it feels like. And it's crazy. It's unpredictable. It can wipe out all of the work that you've put in as a team since the day you started practice in September. But that's the beauty of college basketball. And that's why people watch. And that's why there's all this money in March. And that's why John Rothstein walks around his house and says, "This is March." And his wife tells him to shut up because that's what The Athletic just wrote about. This is March. This is March. Call me John Rothstein, but this is March.
You feel better that you got that off your chest now?
No, it was actually a great feature on John Rothstein of CBS Sports that was written in The Athletic, and basically said his wife was like, he walks around the house and says, "This is March." And I tell him that he doesn't need to say that out loud.
Bless that woman.
Yes, she's a saint.
This podcast is going up on Thursday. Alabama plays on Friday, approximately 8:30 p.m. Game's going to be on SEC Network in the SEC quarterfinals. If you'd like to see who they will play tonight, Thursday night, Oklahoma versus Kentucky, roughly the same time. Alabama will get the winner of that game in the quarterfinals of the SEC tournament. That's all we've got here. Wanted to do a tight 30, 35-minute show just to get some hoops conversation going in your podcast feed this week. We will be back next week to probably break down whatever happens this week in Nashville and also discuss the big bracket, which gets released on Sunday, and potentially look at Alabama's path in the NCAA tournament. In the meantime, though, be sure to rate and review this show wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 247 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 247 and 24/7 Sports so you can get all of this great dialogue, conversation, context, coverage of the Alabama men's basketball team. A lot of different words there. We give you a lot of options at Bama 247. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening. We will talk to you all again soon.